In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
This is the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Tuesday, September 13th. I'm Donal Ware, and as you know, it's Takeaway Tuesday on the podcast. I give you some thoughts on what happened in week 2 of HBCU football. First of all, the HBCU coaches and media polls have been released. No surprise that Jackson State is number 1 in both polls. As a matter of fact, you got Jackson State, South Carolina State, and North Carolina Central 1 through 3 in both polls. In the coaches poll, Prairie View A&M is number 4, Alcorn State is number 5, and Southern is number 6. So that was, in fact, the result of the poll last week, where all 6 of those teams were ranked in all 6 of those positions. The only newbie that you have in the poll is Hampton, who was not ranked on last week, who was number 10 in the poll. Bowie State losing a game. Saginaw Valley State got beat pretty good, 40-12, drops in the media poll from number 2 to number 4. Albany State lost to Florida A&M, dropped from 4 to 6. And the only school that was not in the poll that is in the poll again this week is Virginia Union. Congratulations to the HBCU National Players of the Week. Out of Jackson State, is the second week in a row that Jackson State has had a player. Niles Gaddy, the linebacker, was absolutely tremendous against Tennessee State. He had 3.5 sacks. He had 4 tackles for loss, in the ball game. Dominating defensive performance by Jackson State. Also, Jada Byers, the running back for Virginia Union, the other HBCU National Player of the Week, 289 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns as Virginia Union defeated Valdosta State 45-40 in Valdosta. That's a big win for Virginia Union, who is 2-0 on the season. So you can find more of that information, whether it's the HBCU coaches and media polls or more information about the HBCU National Players of the Week on our website at boxtorow.com. Couple of takeaways from week 2. Number 1, congratulations to all of the teams that are 2-0. We have 7 teams that are 2-0 after week 2. Now, that's rare, okay? That's rare when you're talking about HBCU football on any level, because whether it's Division II, whether it's FCS, whether it's NAIA, just because of a lot of times you're playing a lot of those so-called money games, and rightfully so. I mean, I think you have to be able to make a living for your football program, for your athletics budgets, and you got to be able to play some of those money games so that you can be able to fund that football program, make improvements, all of those kind of things. So here are the schools: Benedict, Virginia Union, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Hampton, North Carolina Central, Langston, and Fort Valley State. You can look at UAPB and say, well, you played Lane to start the season. Man, that Lane is a tough opponent. I mean, we act like because a school is in a lesser division that school can't play or isn't very good. Lane's got a good football program. And for many years, I mean, Albany State, Bowie State can beat a lot of the FCS HBCUs, right? Go back to years past when Tuskegee was balling out. Winston-Salem State under Connell Maynard went all the way to the Division II national championship. So let's not, act like there isn't good football at the Division II level, but UAPB has beaten two teams. Hey, they're 2-0. Say what you want. They're 2-0. Look at North Carolina Central. Big win over A&T to start the season. Made a statement, I think, against Winston-Salem State, 41-0 with the victory. Remember, this was a 20-13 game last year. So you can even see the improvement with the Eagles and 2-0 to start the season. Again, Benedict, Virginia Union, big win, as I mentioned, against Valdosta State. So, I mean, Langston, right? 2-0 on the season to start the season there. So congratulations to all of those schools who are 2-0 on the season. That's difficult that can happen, particularly at this time, because, you're playing up in a lot of situations, no matter what level you're on. So another takeaway, or some other takeaways, I mean, I look at Jackson State. Boy, Jackson State is getting it done defensively. Now, 16-3, 8 touchdown and 3 field goals for the Jackson State Tigers in the game. I said my prediction was that Jackson State would win by 10. Jackson State won by 13. I didn't know this was going to be a low-scoring game. As a matter of fact, I got to give some kudos to Tennessee State as well for holding Jackson State to 16 points. We saw what happened with Florida and what Jackson State did to Florida A&M 2 weeks ago. So kudos to Tennessee State. Plus, coming off that loss to Eastern Washington, where Tennessee State gave up something close to 600 yards of total offense. So congratulations to Jackson State on the victory, and give kudos to Tennessee State. Shedeur Sanders, 30 of 44, 276 yards, 1 touchdown, no interception in the ball game. He was sacked 1 time. I mean, that's an efficient game. Again, he's completing a high percentage of his passes. But again, 44 attempts for 276 yards. He's finding the open guy, given what the defense takes him, taking what the defense gives him, and give Tennessee State a lot of credit for that in that Memphis, of course, that classic, the Southern Heritage Classic there in Memphis. So big win for Jackson State, who remains 2-0. I mean, I heard some people, I've heard some scuttlebutt about, only scored 16 points this week, whatever. I mean, Jackson State's got a high-powered offense. That's good. But that defense right now, no doubt about it, is playing lights out. Let's see what else I have for my takeaways. Grambling. Now, Grambling had a big win, 47-21 over Northwestern State. I think when you talk about big jumps, you hear a lot of coaches on all levels of football talk about making a big jump from week 1 to week 2. Well, if you look at Grambling, Grambling was up against an FBS opponent in week 1, so it was going to be a tough deal anyway. But I don't know if I saw, because Northwestern State's got a pretty good program, and these two programs have played before. Northwestern State has gotten the better of Grambling. But you look at this time around, Hugh Jackson, his offensive staff, I think, made a statement by scoring the 47 points on number 1. Quaterius Hawkins, the quarterback for Grambling, 13 of 23, 293 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions in the ball game. And Grambling also rushed for 145 yards. Maurice Washington leading the way, 95 yards on only 5 carries. So it was a balanced attack when you look at Grambling, from running the football, also passing the football, and putting up 47 points in the victory over Northwestern State. I thought that was that's a big win. I mean, when you're talking about Grambling, and from 1 week to the next, we talk about making that jump. I think ultimately Grambling made a nice jump. Doesn't get any easier. We talked about the Jackson State defense. And so Grambling and Jackson State going to get together on Saturday. That should be a good one. It's certainly a candidate. I'd have to look at the schedule. Haven't looked at the schedule for week 3 as of yet, but certainly would be a strong contender for the HBCU National Game of the Week. No doubt about that. I mean, I would say one of my other takeaways would be Virginia Union's win. Now in the HBCU media poll, Dr. Alvin Parker. I mean, I think it was a bit of, by Virginia Union standards, it was a down year last year. 6-4, lost that game to Valdosta State, able to get it. Now you're putting yourself in more of a national spotlight, I think, not only in HBCUs, but also at the Division II level. I hadn't seen the poll to know whether Virginia Union was in the poll, whether it was getting votes. I'm not even sure. I mean, Valdosta State's a perennial power. So to me, I would think, I don't know if Valdosta State's ranked or not. I'm not 100% sure about that. But Valdosta State's a perennial power. So you can go down to Valdosta on the road, hostile environment, and get the victory. I mean, I think that's really saying something for Valdosta State. Another takeaway for me, South Carolina State with a 33-9 victory over Bethune-Cookman. I think, when you're talking about, I mean, you look at that first game against UCF, sure, you wanted a bit of a better showing, but, it's not like you're playing a lower level FBS program in UCF. I mean, that's it's not a Power 5, but it's that next tier, I would say, below. So, I mean, that's a tough task, losing that game 56-10, South Carolina State, to be able to bounce back. And it's true. Sometimes playing up makes you better. I mean, I think Bethune-Cookman's got a solid squad. It's got a solid quarterback in Jalen Jones. Remember him from a couple of seasons ago when he played at Jackson State. I mean, they forced him into 2 turnovers. And, I had a chance. I'm going to tell you what. And, for those that don't know, okay, I've been watching for South Carolina State, a young man, linebacker, for a couple of years now by the name of BJ Davis. You look at and by the way, and I'll tell you one of my other takeaways as well, but you've got some, Shaquille, I guess he's calling himself Shaquille now, Shaquille Leonard, Darius Leonard, who's with the Colts, right? You've got these guys that are in the National Football League from South Carolina State, specifically on the defensive side of the football. Well, Buddy Pugh on the coaches conference call, the MEAC conference call, said that this guy's next in line in terms of being an NFL player. You look at the production. I mean, I just look at the production each week. He does nothing but produce. I mean, you look at the Godbolts and the Jablonski Greens of the world, and those guys deserve all the credit that they're getting and have gotten. People aren't talking enough about this kid, BJ Davis. Another splendid game. 2 interceptions, a pick 6. Okay, I think the one, because Buddy Pugh said that, with BJ Davis, he's got, it's the weight. He's got to get his weight up, for that linebacker position, but he can run, says he always plays hard. He could be the next guy that plays for South Carolina State. So that South Carolina State defense was really, really good. You look at things offensively. If I look at the numbers, Corey Field, 6 of 16, 141 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Well, you'd like to see the pass completion percentage up. There's no question about that. When you talk about the 6 completions, 141 yards, even the 16 attempts, 141 yards, I mean, he didn't make a mistake. And then the running game ate it. 237 yards rushing with Kendrell Flowers, another running back we don't talk enough about, had 153 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He averaged almost 10 yards a carry, did Kendrell Flowers. So I thought, that was a big win, sort of I don't know if I want to call it a bounce back win for South Carolina State, because it's hard to say, well, it's a bounce back from a loss. I'll put it like that. But it's hard to say when you're going up against a UCF. Another takeaway that came out of the coaches call, Luke Williams, editor of the Black College Sports page, has done a tremendous job for in excess of 30 years. Well, each year he has a list of all of the players that are on active NFL rosters prior to the start of the season. South Carolina State, 7 players on NFL rosters. Unbelievable. As I mentioned, Coach Buddy Pugh says BJ Davis is next. And Lute asked him, well, what is it? Why are you doing? how are you able to get these players? What are you doing there in Orangeburg to allow for those players? And Buddy Pugh just said maybe it's part of a system. He really, it's just one of those things, basically, he said, but it always had been like that at South Carolina State when Willie Jeffries was there. The other thing is South Carolina State recruits South Carolina very well. And that should show you, this is a message, right? We talk about, I've talked many times about the National Football League and the lack of players being drafted into the National Football League. It's a problem. It continues to be a problem. Okay, great. We have 4 players drafted this year. Good. We had 0 drafted last year. So what? I think at the end of the day, a lot of these players are signing free agent contracts, but it shows me 2 things. Obviously, HBCU players can play. I think it was 30 or in excess of 30 that were on NFL rosters. And again, a lot of those guys, at least 40% of those guys are free agent guys, maybe a little bit more this year. South Carolina, you talk about great football. You talk about, Florida, Texas, all of those places where great football is played, many other places. We don't talk enough about South Carolina because, again, if at the FCS level at one institution, most of the kids are getting that are playing that have the South Carolina State name are from the state of South Carolina. So that just goes to show me, it could be part of the system with what Buddy Pugh and his staff is doing over, 21 years as the head coach. But it also shows me that there's some talented football players, certainly in the state of South Carolina. So those are my takeaways from week 2 of the HBCU season. I would also say Delaware State, Morgan State, both good football games. I mean, Delaware is a perennial power. Delaware State falls 34-9. That game used to be like 70-0, 70-3. You know what I mean? Morgan State falls. I forget the final score was 8 points. I think it was 36-28. No, 28-21, something like that. It was 7 points. It was 8 points. 8 points that Morgan State fell to Towson State for the Battle of Baltimore. I mean, that was a game. Last year's game was 31-0. It was a game that, Towson looked past. You look past Morgan to get ready for the next opponent. But Morgan State came to play. Watch out for both of those schools. Morgan State, Damon Wilson doing a really good job there so far. And what Rod Milstead is doing at Delaware State. Again, I keep telling you guys, I keep saying, hot take, Delaware State winning the MEAC in 2022. So that's about it for today's HBCU Football Daily Podcast. On tomorrow, we'll start to transition a little bit into week 3 of the HBCU football season. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on our website at boxtorow.com, also iHeartMedia.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget, you can find us on the Box to Row YouTube page as well. And when chatting or tweeting or using social media with respect to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, don't forget to use the hashtag HBCU130. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.